It was almost midnight when the rain began to fall over the city, painting the glass walls of Daniel Carter's penthouse with streaks of silver. Inside, the room glowed faintly in the light of the fireplace, and the air carried the faint scent of rain and burning wood. On the grand leather couch, the young billionaire CEO lay still, eyes closed, chest rising and falling rhythmically, pretending to sleep. What no one knew was that tonight, Daniel wasn't just a man resting after a long day. He was testing someone. Because Daniel Carter didn't trust people anymore. Once betrayed by those closest to him, a fiancé who used him, a partner who stole from him, and employees who flattered him only for favors, he had grown to believe that kindness was a mask people wore for benefit. But lately, something, or rather someone, had begun to stir a strange warmth in his heart. A quiet, shy maid named Lily who worked in his mansion. She never looked him in the eyes, never spoke unless asked, and yet, every time he walked past her, he noticed how her hands trembled slightly while cleaning, and how she always left a small flower in a cup near his study, never with a note, never claiming credit. He wanted to know why. And so, that night, Daniel pretended to fall asleep on the couch, waiting to see what she would do when she thought no one was watching. What he saw next would shatter the walls he had built around his heart. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of quiet hearts, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to StoryNest right now. This story will remind you that sometimes, the smallest acts of love can heal the deepest wounds. The sound of soft footsteps approached. The maid's delicate figure entered the living room, her uniform slightly damp from cleaning the kitchen. Lily thought he was asleep. Her movements were quiet, careful, as if afraid to disturb even the air around him. She gently picked up his coffee cup, adjusted the blanket that had slipped off his shoulders, and looked at him for a moment with something he hadn't seen in anyone's eyes in years, genuine concern. Then she did something that made his chest tighten. She whispered, barely audible, "You work too much, sir. I wish you'd smile sometimes." He felt her words like a feather brushing against old wounds. He almost opened his eyes, almost spoke, but then she reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded paper, and placed it on the table beside him. Her fingers lingered there for a second before she turned and quietly left. When she was gone, Daniel sat up, curiosity burning in his chest. He unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a small, hand-drawn sketch of him, sitting at his desk by the window, with a tired smile. Underneath, written in fragile handwriting, were the words, "You look your best when you forget to be sad." He stared at it for a long time. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or call her back. But what shocked him most wasn't the sketch, it was that someone had noticed his sadness at all. Over the following days, Daniel began watching Lily more closely. Not in a cruel or suspicious way, but with quiet curiosity. He noticed how she stayed late after everyone left, fixing small things others ignored. How she sometimes brought a piece of bread from the kitchen to feed the birds outside his window. How she once gave her umbrella to a gardener in the rain and walked home drenched. She never did these things for praise, in fact, she seemed almost afraid of being noticed. And Daniel found himself wondering what pain hides behind eyes that kind. Weeks passed, and his company faced a critical moment. A business merger worth billions was falling apart, and Daniel's temper grew short. Late one night, he returned home furious, slamming his briefcase on the table. Lily, who had been polishing the floor, froze. He saw fear flicker in her eyes, and guilt instantly washed over him. He turned away, but as he sat down, the stress overwhelmed him. His chest tightened, he felt dizzy. The world blurred. When he woke up, he was in bed, his tie loosened, shoes off, blanket pulled up to his chest. He heard soft sobs nearby. Turning his head, he saw Lily sitting on the floor, holding his hand and crying quietly. She thought he was still unconscious. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Please don't leave like my father did. People need you, even if you think they don't." The words pierced him deeper than he could understand. She didn't know he was listening. He lay still, letting the tears slip from his own eyes silently. The next morning, he couldn't look at her the same way again. He began to speak to her, small things at first. A thank you. A question about her day. Slowly, the wall between them began to crumble. He learned that Lily was only 22, working to pay for her younger brother's surgery. Her mother had died years ago, and her father had left them. She had come to the city with nothing but hope and a heart that refused to harden, no matter how cruel life had been. Daniel found himself drawn to that light inside her, the quiet resilience, the unspoken courage. For the first time in years, he smiled, genuinely smiled. But one evening changed everything. Daniel's business partner, Richard, the same man who once betrayed him, came to the mansion for a meeting. During dinner, Daniel noticed Richard speaking harshly to Lily, mocking her for spilling water accidentally. She apologized, trembling, but he continued, calling her a poor, useless girl. Daniel watched silently for a moment. The old him might have stayed quiet. But this time, something inside him snapped. He stood up. "Get out," he said coldly. Richard laughed, thinking he was joking, until he saw Daniel's eyes. "No one talks to her like that," Daniel continued, voice trembling with rage. "You think money makes you powerful? It only makes you small when you forget your humanity." The room fell silent. Richard stormed out, and Lily stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Daniel turned to her, his voice softening. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for being kind." From that night on, the distance between them disappeared completely. They spoke often, about life, about pain, about dreams. He offered to help with her brother's treatment, but she refused money. "I just want to earn it myself," she said softly. "You've already done enough." Her pride touched him deeply. He began to find joy in small things again, morning coffee, laughter, music, all because of the quiet maid who had once been invisible in his home. One rainy evening, as the sky darkened and thunder rolled, Daniel found her standing by the window, watching the city lights. He walked up beside her, the same way she had once stood beside him while he pretended to sleep. "Do you still draw?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "Only when I feel something worth remembering." He took a deep breath and said, "Then draw this moment. Because I'll never forget it." For the first time, she looked up at him, really looked, and in her eyes, he saw the reflection of every second chance life had ever offered him. The next morning, he found another drawing on his desk. It was of two people standing by the window, facing the rain, side by side. Beneath it were the words, "Sometimes, healing begins when someone simply stays." Daniel folded the drawing carefully and placed it in his wallet. From that day, he was no longer just the rich CEO known for his empire. He became the man who believed again, who smiled again, who learned that kindness could rebuild even the most broken soul. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to StoryNest. Your support helps us bring more stories that remind the world how love and kindness still exist. Special request, comment below. Kindness changes everything. If you believe small acts can heal the world. And as the rain continued to fall over the city that night, Daniel Carter sat by the window of his penthouse, holding a worn sketch and smiling softly, no longer pretending, no longer testing, just feeling. For the first time in a long, long while, he finally felt alive.